What if I told you that overselling seats on a flight is actually a good thing? Not for you as a passenger, of course, but for the airline itself. So you might ask, why do airlines oversell their seats anyways? If there's so many seats on an airplane, how and why are they overselling? Well, first, I'll get into the proper explanation, followed by examples of how overselling actually works. So, overselling flights is a practice done by airlines to make sure that every seat is being sold for revenue passengers, and making sure that flights don't leave empty. Granted, this is not always the case. Let's be honest, things happen in life. Irregular operations are typically a good case for overselling, but let's take two different scenarios for example. Let's say you go on an all-night bender in Vegas and you have a 7 a.m. flight the next morning. Odds are you probably aren't going to make it. Or if you're going from St. John's in Newfoundland to Vancouver via Toronto and there's a giant snowstorm in St. John's, odds are you're probably going to miss your connecting flight to Vancouver. This is where overselling takes effect. In both scenarios, these people are not going to make their flights. That's mainly the reason why airlines oversell their flights. There were a few airlines in the past that don't oversell their flights like WestJet. Well, what do you do when a similar scenario happens, like the ones I previously just mentioned? Well, you just gotta wait until the next flight that has open seats. Or, if you oversell, then a similar scenario might happen again. And this just becomes a rinse and repeat situation until it's not. But you might be asking, well, what if everyone shows up to a flight and it's still oversold? Well, that's when the airline starts handing out volunteer credits. Nowadays, airlines are getting very generous with their credits after that one incident with United. You know the one I'm talking about. Passengers that volunteer not to fly on that specific flight can receive hundreds of dollars in flight credits. I've even heard of a case where a family of 4 traveling to Korea took volunteer credits for 4 days in a row. This worked out to be over $10,000 in flight credits. That being said, I cannot confirm if this was 100% true or not, but it's definitely believable. Now I'm going to go through a live scenario of examples of what happens during oversellings with the actual flights. Alrighty, so here we are, taking a look at a flight between Vancouver and Frankfurt on Air Canada that is departing on March 32nd of this year. And that's for all of you people that watch The Simpsons out there.
Oh, lousy March weather.
That being said, I can't actually say the actual flight number or even the actual date of it. I don't know. This is some random flight to Frankfurt. Just so happens to be operated Air Canada. It can be operated by Uzbekistan Airlines for all I care. But anyways, currently only 4 available seats in business. There is 0 in premium economy and it's actually oversold by 6 in economy. Well, what are you gonna do with 6 oversold seats? So let's take a look at some of the inbound connections and how many people are checking it locally. So how many people are starting in Vancouver versus the people that are connecting from different destinations. So we can see one of the tightest connections that we have here is a flight from Edmonton, and it only has 62 minutes. Well, that flight didn't originally start up in Edmonton for the day. Maybe that flight started up in Vancouver, and it left Vancouver late because maybe a passenger was late. Maybe there was a maintenance issue, or the list goes on. Maybe they were late loading the plane. I don't know. So that flight now leaves late. It arrives in Edmonton late. Then it has to turn around, come back to Vancouver. So everything just kind of gets shuffled down the line quite a bit. So then maybe your 62 minute connection might only be 22 minutes connections. Or here's a prime example, 83 minutes from Seattle. Seattle has some of the worst flow times in the US, maybe behind, I think San Francisco is a bit better. LA, very notorious. LaGuardia, very notorious. JFK, oh my god. And how flow times work is it's kind of whoever gets the biggest or whoever is more susceptible to flow are the destinations that are closest to the airport. So airports like Vancouver, Bellingham, Victoria. Those flights going from those cities going to Seattle, those are going to be very susceptible to flow. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is flow? Well, flow is when an airline or an airport, has too many flights coming in at one specific time. So say, for example, this in Vancouver, very easily Vancouver, I'm actually surprised that Vancouver has flow, 7 o'clock in the morning. There's way too many planes coming in at one time. So the airports that are closest to the city, so let's say Vancouver, for example, they will have a specific time that they have to take off from Vancouver. And if they miss that time, then they have to get reassigned flow time again to make sure that they can land within that time that they can slot into in Seattle. And Seattle is one of the worst airports in the Western United States for flow, maybe behind LA and San Francisco. So say, for example, maybe you have a flight that's going from Vancouver to Seattle, leaves at 8 a.m. Realistically, if they're susceptible to flow, maybe it won't leave Vancouver till 8:20 or 8:25. So that flight leaves Vancouver to Seattle, turns around, then comes back. And the other problem with Seattle too is that the lineup to take off out of Seattle is just way too long at times. You got Alaska's their hub there, Delta's their hub there, you got a billion Southwest planes everywhere, and then you throw United American in the mix. It's just such a giant mess. It's too big of an airport for too small of a space. So realistically, this 83-minute connection could turn into 43 minutes because Seattle is just such a tiny airport for how big it is. Not too crazy about Seattle, it's okay. But anyways, hey, maybe this flight has mechanical delay in Seattle, and then maybe they're scheduled to arrive after this flight to Frankfurt takes off. Well, everyone's gonna miss. What are you gonna do? Well, what you can either do is, to be easiest, you can give them a hotel and they can travel on the same flight the next day. Or typically the most common option is, hey, guess what? Air Canada has a big joint business venture partner, Lufthansa. So let's send them on Lufthansa. Maybe they're going to Dubrovnik, maybe. And then, I don't know, Lufthansa has so many flights to Dubrovnik or wherever they might be going in Europe, for example. So that kind of begs kind of the three questions. It's like the major part of why airlines oversell these flights is because of misconnecting passengers, maybe maintenance issues, weather, especially in the winter. Canada is very susceptible to winter. That's mainly the main reason why airlines oversell their flights. Now, very quick disclaimer, this is all hypothetical. None of this info that I'm sharing with you all, this is all completely hypothetical and is made up and does not reflect an actual flight and is only being used for educational purposes only. This flight does not exist. None of these flights on here, these are all hypothetical flights and don't reflect actual passengers' information or information pertaining to Air Canada or any airline in general. Again, it really does suck that overselling is a common business practice in the airline industry. But in the end of the day, it just makes sense as to why airlines do it. I really hope this brought some more info and insight into how overselling works. I've been in the aviation industry for around 15 years now, and I'm glad I can share my knowledge with you all. So that being said, if you like this video, feel free to drop a like or subscribe. I also recently turned on super thanks if you feel like supporting my channel and the content I make. It's very appreciated. If you're wondering why I have that turned on instead of a Patreon, in full honesty, I feel like I can't really deliver on a Patreon on a video, weekly, or monthly basis. So having a tip jar set up like super thanks seems a lot better and honest. You don't have to use it, but if you do, again, it's greatly appreciated. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.